Hey, it's me, Bobbert33, and welcome back to my RareWare Retrospective. This time we're going to one of the most popular games on the Nintendo 64, GoldenEye, also known as GoldenEye 64. In this video, we're going to find out how well this game aged, and if this game is still one of the best first-person shooter ever. Now, believe it or not, GoldenEye was originally going to be a Super Nintendo game as a 2D shooter, much like Contra, but with Donkey Kong Country style graphics. This was later moved to the Nintendo 64 and become an on-rail shooter, much like Time Crisis and House of the Dead. This was later changed from on-rails to a regular first-person shooter, which was kind of a new genre for at least home console. As for PC, I can really think of a few games that were first-person shooters. Wolfenstein and Doom comes to mind. Now, most of these ideas from GoldenEye were actually from the new employees at RareWare, most of which were the very first game, believe it or not. As for beta stuff in the game, other than having items as placeholders or redesigns, there were an unused level called Citadel, which can be accessed through GameShark, but not playable in any other way. As for Citadel and the statue level, they were going to be multiplayer stages, but they were cut due to so much lag in the game, so this has stayed as single player levels. Last but definitely not least is that the multiplayer was a last minute decision by RareWare, but it was added in because of the new employees at RareWare, which is surprising to me because that was pretty much the main selling point of the game, at least for me, and it was pretty much the fun part of my childhood. Now with that out of the way, let's get on to the actual game. Now, before I begin the actual review, a few disclaimers. I'm going to try to keep this video as short as possible, even though I have a lot to talk about in each level, but I don't want to make this video go on and on forever. B is that I'm not going to make any comparison to the movie, which is pretty strange. I never watched the movie, not even to this day, and I think this is one of those rare occasions that the video game surpasses the movie. But then again, I hang around a community for gamers, so maybe moviegoers will have the opposite opinion. And 3, I'll admit that I played the easiest mode, which was Agent. Now, from modes easiest to hardest is Agent, Secret Agent, and Double Agents. The difference among them is that the hardest level has harder AI and more missing objectives. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin to the actual first stage. Now on to the first level, this damn level, so I couldn't refuse the easy pun, but this level is a great introduction to the gameplay. But first let's talk about the graphics. Now obviously it's not going to age well being an early N64 title, but it's actually not that bad. I mean, you can tell what everything is, with maybe the exception of one level which we might get into, but it actually looks pretty nice. I guess the only complaint is the human model, which looks so polygon, but you know, it's an old N64 title, so I forgive it there. The gameplay surprisingly aged pretty well. Pretty much whenever you point at somebody directions, the gun will automatically lock onto them, but you can choose to aim, which, well, the cursor is pretty sensitive, but for the most part it works. And there's different weapons you could use, such as, you know, a common pistol, AK-47, and a sniper rifle, plus a grenade launchers, but I'm getting too ahead of myself here. But pretty much, the gameplay actually handles pretty well. Of course, newer gamers who never played the original N64 version will probably have some difficult time getting used to controls, considering that our modern day controller is 2 analog sticks, while this one used the C buttons to pretty much aim and shoot. Well, not aim. You pretty much hold the R button and use the analog stick to shoot, but you can't really move while you're aiming. So there is going to be a slight learning curve there. The second stage is the lab. This is where difficulty gradually getting harder and harder, mostly by adding more objectives. And I feel like the game's learning curve is pretty balanced. Like, you never feel like that you're lost in a level or there's an objective that's too hard. With maybe with one an exception, but again, we'll get to that when we get to that. But this is the part of the game where I really feel like I'm an actual secret agent trying to complete mission after mission and getting from point A to point B. Not like modern first-person shooters like Call of Duty or Battlefield where you just gotta follow the dot on the screen and get to the next segment. I'm not saying that all first-person shooters are like that nowadays, but the popular ones seems to follow that formula. Now for the story of the game, which I forgot to mention in the first part, I apologize, but it's about James Bond stopping this evil corporation called the Janus Corporation, and pretty much stopping this mega weapon called the GoldenEye, which, well, in the game is sort of like either a huge laser beam or this mega missile. Forgive me, I didn't watch the movie, but pretty much James Bond needs to stop that from destroying London and possibly the world. Now the text at the top you see right here is pretty much this game's version of cutscenes. Now back then, in-game cutscenes weren't that common back then, at least not on the Nintendo 64. On the PlayStation and possibly Sega Saturn, cutscenes were becoming more common, but the Nintendo 64 was kind of behind in that. But we've seen some Nintendo 64 games with cutscenes later on in my RareWare retrospective. Now skipping to World 4, the snow area, this is where things start to get a little bit explorational. Not that I'm calling this an exploration game. I mean, it does have a bare minimum of exploration. I won't call it exactly linear, except for getting from point A to point B, the start and beginning of the level. I won't call it linear mainly because you can complete objective in almost any order you want. But this stage is pretty nice. Of course, the wallpaper trees kind of ruin it, as I call it, which is pretty much this game's version of invisible walls and or boundaries. But again, it's a nice level. Now another element that GoldenEye introduced is not shooting certain NPCs. Now earlier in stage 2, you're not supposed to shoot the scientists because for the most part they're innocent people, and in this stage over here, you don't shoot Boris over here, mainly because he's a programmer for them and you need him to work on a computer. Now maybe first time players, or at least nowadays, will probably accidentally shoot him. I know I did in one level back in my childhood, but I think people could tell that he's not a dangerous person by the way he's dressing. So that's a nice touch for RareWare. But then again, this is based off the movie, and assuming gamers now then watch the movie before the game, they will probably know what to do here. Now, one of my kind of sort of nitpick negatives I have over here is the reuse of some stages. I can only recall this happening only twice. The snow level in this case, pretty much the level is the same layout. Most of the buildings are still there. This just have different objective and different things to destroy. But other than that, it's pretty much the same level. Now I understand this is probably staying true to the movie and perhaps system limitations, but still happening twice in the single player campaign. It's I'm not going to give it a big negative score because of that, because it's not really a big deal, but again, it's something worth mentioning. Now, the one negative that really does bother me is the escort mission with Natalia. Now, in this stage in particular, enemies cannot kill Natalia either because I have her on the easiest mode. Enemies just cannot kill Natalia because the game programmer would think it's impossible to complete the level, or if I was just extremely lucky. But either way, the real problem with Natalia is not worrying about enemies killing her, at least not in this stage at least. But Natalia has a tendency to get into a line of fire, thus accidentally killing her. Escort mission is one thing in video games that I do not enjoy. And most times it tends to get me out of the video game experience. This is pretty much the main reason why I can't get into Resident Evil 4, because that escort mission with Ashley. Now, Natalia is also a pretty annoying character to me because she's always getting kidnapped or getting into trouble, which I'm sure RareWare just, try to stay true to the movie, but it's still pretty annoying. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention throughout this video: if you fail one mission, in my case it's usually Natalia getting killed, you pretty much gotta start the whole mission all over again. It's all or nothing in this game, even on the easiest mode. Now, although I'm still not a big fan of escort missions or particularly NPC, I will say this, that Natalia is not a game killer. Yeah, she can ruin the experience, especially if she ends up getting in your way and failing a mission. But for the most part, Natalia is very tolerable. But then again, I'm playing it on easy mode, so maybe the harder mode will make it less tolerable. But at least I was able to get through the game with no problems, or little to no problems. But the last thing I want to mention is the spy weapons, like the laser watch over here. Some of these weapons are only available in certain missions, and sometimes you can only access them by going to the menu and selecting that gadget. Now, the jungle stage is the most difficult and hardest stage of them all for 3 reasons, and they're pretty much your mission objective in this game. The first one is to destroy all these machine gun turrets, which you saw way in the distance over there, which can be very annoying to spot with all the green and everything. And the gamer fog. Pretty much gamer fog is sometimes items don't appear at a certain distance, and sometimes you need to get closer in order to see them. Second is Xena. You gotta defeat her, and the problem with that is that she carries 2 weapons, a machine gun and a grenade launcher. She is probably the toughest boss battle in this game. And the third and final reason why this stage is hard is that you have to keep Natalia alive. Now, to be fair, Natalia is able to defend herself and take out enemies for you in this stage, so there's a bright side to that. But once she is dead, you pretty much have to restart the whole level again. Now, to be fair, the level is not very long, but still, if you fail the mission, it's pretty painful to restart the whole level just because of that one mission, which is usually, for me, Natalia dying. But for the most part, I thought the jungle stage, I would never complete it, and I thought I was going to rage quit at that moment, but I was still able to beat it. But man, was it a painful experience. Now, the last Natalia escort mission is probably the second most annoying escort mission ever. Granted, I'm playing on agent mode. I'm assuming secret agent and double agent will probably be a nightmare for me, but pretty much you gotta protect Natalia while she's deactivating the GoldenEye missile. And the main problem with this is that enemies just keep on coming from both sides. It's not impossible to keep up with them, but sometimes they just break through some of the grass and pretty much start shooting at Natalia. But most of the time they go for you first before Natalia, so there's one positive there. And pretty much in my I believe my second playthrough of the stage, that once Natalia was able to deactivate bomb. She pretty much walked into my line of fire and I accidentally killed her, which can show that how annoying this NPC can really be. Now on to the last stage, at least in the main single player experience, which is Cradle. Cradle is pretty much the most epic final level you can ever get. The music is amazing. Yeah, I forgot to mention the music is pretty good in every single way. Pretty much try to stay true to the original GoldenEye score. But pretty much in this game, you're playing, laser tag with the antagonist of the game, but, using actual guns. And it's a pretty short level, actually, but it's pretty fun, and I really enjoy the chase and the final part that goes with it, which is the antagonist falling to his death. GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 actually aged pretty decently. Of course, there's some areas that didn't age well, like the graphics obviously, and some of the controls a bit, but I was able to pick it up and play and finish it with little to no problem, with some levels here and there giving me a headache, but then again, that's just more of the level being difficult rather than the game being difficult. But I think younger gamers will have a harder time getting into this because they didn't grow up with this experience, especially if their main exposure to first-person shooters is Call of Duty. But I do think they should give it a try. I think it'd be a fun experience for anybody. Now, the sales of the game, GoldenEye did pretty well. It's the third best-selling Nintendo 64 games. Ahead of it is Super Mario 64 and Mario Kart 64. GoldenEye sold like about 8.64 million, making it the second best-selling RareWare game ever. The first being Donkey Kong Country on the Nintendo 64 with 9 million. But despite all the success, did James Bond get a sequel? Well, yes, in two different ways. Yes, there's actually another James Bond game on the Nintendo 64, Die Another Day, but that wasn't created by RareWare. It was created by EA. RareWare did make the sequel to a first-person shooter called Perfect Dark, a game also on the Nintendo 64, and I'm also going to cover that on my RareWare Retrospective series, so that's another video for another time. Now, GoldenEye did get a remake in 2010 on the Nintendo Wii and a year later on the PS3 and 360. But it plays not really like the original Nintendo 64 game. It was more like a Call of Duty game with James Bond in it. It's still a fun game, and I may do a versus video in the near future, but just in case, I prefer this one over the remake. Now tune in next time where I'll talk about Diddy Kong Racing in my next retrospective review. And I'd also like to thank FighterXaos for making my thumbnail for this video. Check out his channel, FighterXaos.deviantart.com, and he also takes commission if you want a drawing of your own. Take care, and I'll catch you guys later.